Nestled in the heart of London, Garden Lodge remains a cherished monument to Freddie Mercury's remarkable legacy. The Georgian-style home, surrounded by towering brick walls and vibrant gardens, was not only Freddie's sanctuary, but also the place where his creative genius thrived. Today, fans from all over the world leave notes and flowers at the gates, a testament to the love they still hold for the legendary Queen frontman. But for those who have stepped inside, whispers of a different story emerge, a story of a lingering presence. Freddie Mercury's close friends and former companions occasionally visit Garden Lodge to pay their respects or reminisce about the good times shared with him. Some have reported strange but comforting sensations, particularly in the music room, where Freddie spent countless hours composing and playing the piano. According to Mary Austin, Freddie's lifelong confidant, there's a certain energy that fills the room. It feels as though Freddie is still here, sitting at the piano, humming melodies she once shared in an interview. Another close friend described hearing faint piano notes during a quiet evening visit. Thinking it was their imagination, they dismissed it until it happened again. The house staff has their own tales to tell. A longtime housekeeper claimed to feel a warm breeze pass by her while cleaning the music room, on a day when all the windows were closed. She also recounted hearing faint laughter echoing from the living room, reminiscent of Freddie's unmistakable chuckle. One visitor, a musician invited to the house by Freddie's estate, described feeling a sudden chill while standing near Freddie's favorite chair. It was like being in the presence of a great force, he said, not frightening, but incredibly moving. Many believe these occurrences are simply the echoes of a vibrant life lived to the fullest, rather than a haunting in the traditional sense. Freddie Mercury's spirit, if it lingers, seems to do so out of love for the place he called home, and perhaps to inspire those who follow in his footsteps. Garden Lodge continues to be a private residence, but the stories told by those who visited or worked there add a layer of mystery to its already rich history. Garden Lodge's unassuming exterior hides the deeper mysteries that have unfolded over the years. As the home of one of the most iconic voices in music history, it has a soul of its own, a fact that those who've stepped inside cannot easily forget. One particularly chilling tale comes from a former caretaker of the property. While doing routine maintenance late one evening, he passed by the music room and froze. The piano, untouched and covered with a protective cloth, emitted a single, haunting note. At first, he thought it might be a draft or vibration from outside, but when the same note played again, followed by a soft progression of chords, he knew it wasn't random. It was unmistakably one of Freddie's songs. He later confided, a melody I couldn't place at first, but it felt familiar, almost like a message. When he dared to step inside, the room fell silent. The piano remained still, its keys untouched, and yet the air felt charged with something unseen. One neighbor, who had lived on the same street for decades, swears to have seen a shadowy figure standing in the garden on more than one occasion. Late at night, under the faint glow of the garden lamps, this figure appeared to gaze upwards, as though contemplating the stars. The neighbor initially dismissed it as a trick of the light or perhaps a late visitor, but the sightings persisted, always in the same spot. They looked serene, almost peaceful, the neighbor said, but what struck me was the posture. It reminded me of Freddie in his quieter moments, when he'd step outside to think or relax. Perhaps the most puzzling event involves a door inside Garden Lodge that has reportedly locked itself on several occasions. This particular door leads to a small storage room where Freddie used to keep personal keepsakes. According to Mary Austin, she once heard faint humming from behind it, Freddie's voice, clear as day. She called out, but the humming stopped. When she tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge, even though it had no lock installed. It was like he was there, Mary later admitted, but it wasn't frightening. It felt protective, like he didn't want anyone to disturb that space just yet. The next morning, the door opened easily, as though nothing had happened. Inside, nothing seemed out of place, though Mary couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen lingered in that small, intimate room. As the years passed, the stories surrounding Garden Lodge only grew more curious. The house, once a private retreat for Freddie Mercury, had transformed into something almost sacred, an enigmatic monument to a life well lived. but not entirely gone. Each new visitor to the home seemed to encounter some unexplained phenomenon, whether they were aware of the legend or not. For some, these events were nothing more than coincidence, but for others, the house whispered secrets that were impossible to ignore. It was a crisp autumn evening when a famous musician, who had been invited by Freddie's estate to spend some time at Garden Lodge, experienced the most unsettling encounter yet. He had stayed in the guest room for several nights, but that particular evening was different. As he lay in bed, he could hear something faint, soft, almost imperceptible notes that seemed to drift from the direction of the music room. At first, he tried to dismiss it as his imagination, a trick of the night. But the notes grew clearer, a melody he knew all too well, a piano piece that Freddie had once played during an impromptu gathering at the house, a tune the musician could never forget. As the music played, it was as if the room itself began to hum with an eerie energy. Unable to resist, the musician rose from his bed and made his way toward the sound. When he reached the music room, the door stood slightly ajar, as though waiting for him. But the sight inside was nothing like he had expected. The piano stood there, bathed in the dim light of a single candle that flickered from a nearby table. The keys moved on their own, as though an invisible hand was pressing them, playing the very melody the musician had heard earlier. The musician stood frozen in awe, a sense of overwhelming awe and sadness washing over him. The music was perfect, too perfect, as though Freddie himself was sitting at the piano, playing just for him. But no one was there. On another occasion, a close friend of Freddie's who had known him during his final days returned to Garden Lodge, overcome with the need to reconnect with the spirit of the man who had meant so much to him. The friend was alone that evening, wandering through the halls, when he noticed a strange movement in the hallway just beyond the living room. He described it as a fleeting shadow, but it wasn't just any shadow, it was a shape, distinct and human. He called out, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it seemed to drift, moving toward the stairs with a grace that was both eerie and familiar. The friend followed, his footsteps echoing through the empty house. But by the time he reached the top of the stairs, the figure had vanished. It wasn't the first time such an apparition had been seen. In fact, several visitors over the years had reported similar sightings. A fleeting shadow near the staircase, always heading upstairs, always disappearing before anyone could get close enough to investigate. But the most unsettling detail? Every single person who had seen this shadow described it in the same way, standing tall, shoulders slightly hunched, and a distinct walk that seemed to carry the weight of a life lived in music and passion. It was a walk that seemed so Freddie. One of the more peculiar aspects of these hauntings involved the strange sensations felt during the night hours, particularly in the living room where Freddie had entertained close friends, and at times a select audience. Over the years, several former friends have claimed to feel the presence of an unseen audience, as if Freddie was hosting a gathering just beyond their sight. The air would grow heavy, and soft laughter would ripple through the room, as though the voices of long-departed friends lingered in the space. Sometimes, a faint shimmer would appear near the walls, and those present swore they could feel the warmth of an invisible group enjoying their company. It was as though the house was not only haunted by Freddie's spirit, but by the essence of those who had shared time with him, their laughter and joy frozen in time. "It's not scary," one guest recalled. "It's more like being part of something timeless. It feels as though Freddie's energy is just waiting for you to join him, like you've been invited to a concert that never ends." The house has also become the site of strange occurrences with personal items belonging to Freddie. Items that once belonged to the singer, his favorite jacket, his handwritten lyrics, even his treasured records have gone missing from time to time, only to be found in odd places. One evening, Freddie's iconic black leather jacket vanished from its place in the wardrobe. The housekeeper searched everywhere, but it wasn't until months later that the jacket was found in the back of the closet, hidden beneath piles of old records. No one could explain how it got there. Some believe that Freddie's spirit is playing one last trick on those who visit, giving them a glimpse of his mischievous side. After all, Freddie was known for his playful nature, often toying with those around him. Others believe it's a way of reminding them that, even in death, he still has control over the narrative of his life, his legacy, and his home. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. As the years passed, the whispers surrounding Garden Lodge grew darker, with each new incident only adding to the house's growing legend. Those who came seeking answers found themselves drawn deeper into the mysteries, as though the very walls of the house were alive, pushing them to unravel secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. One cold December night, a musician who had been invited to stay at Garden Lodge found himself unable to sleep. He had always heard the rumors, the strange occurrences that seemed to follow anyone who entered Freddie Mercury's home, but never took them seriously. That night, however, something felt different. The house was unusually silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. He wandered the halls, hoping to shake off the growing sense of unease, but as he passed the living room, he was struck by an overwhelming presence. The temperature dropped suddenly, a chill creeping along his skin, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum filled the air. It sounded like music. He turned toward the music room, certain it was just his mind playing tricks. But as he stood in the doorway, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A shadowy figure sat at the piano, its hands moving across the keys with eerie precision. The silhouette was unmistakably human, tall, slender, and hunched in a way that seemed unnatural. The piano played the haunting melody Freddie had once composed, the same song the musician had heard several times before. But this time it felt different. There was an unsettling quality to the music, a discordant note here and there that sent a chill down his spine. "Freddie," he called out, his voice barely a whisper. The figure paused. The music stopped. The room was silent for a long moment before the figure slowly turned its head toward him. But there was no face, just a dark, empty void where eyes should have been. Frozen in place, the musician stumbled back, his heart racing, but the door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. The walls seemed to close in, and the temperature dropped even further. The music began again, only this time it was distorted, a sickly, warped version of the melody. The piano played itself, but it was as though something was playing it, a presence that wasn't Freddie. Desperate, the musician grabbed for the door handle, but it refused to budge. It was as if the house itself was holding him in place, refusing to let him leave. Suddenly, the hum of the piano stopped. The air grew still, and the oppressive feeling lifted. The door swung open with ease, and the musician stumbled out, gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He left Garden Lodge that night, never to return, convinced that whatever had sat at the piano was no longer the Freddie Mercury he had once known. Garden Lodge had always been known for its vibrant energy, the joyous presence of Freddie that seemed to linger in every corner. But some began to wonder if something more sinister had taken root in the house. What was once a home filled with laughter and music now seemed to hold something darker beneath the surface. In the months following the musician's terrifying encounter, several others reported feeling watched, as if the house was aware of their every movement. The atmosphere became oppressive, the air thick with a sense of malevolence. It wasn't just the piano anymore. The walls seemed to shift, and the once cozy rooms now felt claustrophobic and unsettling. The garden, once a place of beauty and peace, began to feel like a cemetery, a graveyard where the souls of the past lingered, trapped by something beyond understanding. One night, a visitor from abroad stayed at the house. He was a die-hard Freddie fan, someone who had idolized the singer since childhood. He had been invited to stay at Garden Lodge as part of a small group, and he was eager to experience the energy of the place firsthand. But something was off. On the first night, while walking through the garden, he felt an overwhelming sense of being followed. It wasn't just the rustle of leaves in the wind or the soft footsteps on the gravel path. He could feel eyes on him, cold and calculating, watching his every move. He turned sharply, but no one was there. The garden was empty, yet the sense of being stalked remained. He hurried back to the house, only to find the door to the music room ajar. The strange part? He knew the room had been locked. He had watched as the housekeeper had secured it earlier that day. As he stepped inside, he immediately felt a change in the air. The room was freezing, as though the temperature had dropped by several degrees in an instant. The piano stood silent in the center of the room, but the walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as if the house itself were alive. The visitor couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him. Something dark. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a figure, a shadow, crouching near the window. He blinked, and it was gone. That night, in his sleep, he heard voices, soft, whispering voices, too quiet to understand. They seemed to come from all around him. But when he awoke, he found a strange, cold handprint on his pillow, as though someone or something had been beside him while he slept. The rumors of Freddie's ghostly presence grew even more intense, with many locals and visitors claiming that the house was becoming a place of suffering. More people reported strange nightmares, feelings of despair, and inexplicable coldness. Some even spoke of hearing voices calling their names, only to find no one in sight. But the most chilling tale came from a former friend of Freddie's, someone who had known him intimately in the final years of his life. She had visited Garden Lodge shortly after his death, hoping to reconnect with the spirit of the man who had been like a brother to her. But when she entered the house, something felt wrong, horribly wrong. It was as if the house itself was mourning Freddie's death, but in a way that bordered on possessive. As she wandered through the rooms, she found a letter on the floor, handwritten in Freddie's unmistakable script. The letter read, "I'm not gone. You just don't know where to look." When she showed it to the others, it was gone, vanished, as though it had never existed. The air around Garden Lodge had grown thicker with unease, as if the house itself had become an ancient sentinel, guarding something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Every visitor, every friend, every fan had encountered something that could not be explained. Some left with uneasy comfort, while others were never quite the same again. But as the years continued to roll by, the house's mystery deepened, and those brave enough to venture inside soon realized that Freddie Mercury's legacy was not just bound to his music, it was forever entwined with the soul of the house itself. The house had stood quietly for months, its eerie reputation slowly growing as new visitors and old friends alike shared their experiences. But one summer day, as the sun hung high over London, something happened that would change everything. It was a morning like any other when the housekeeper arrived, prepared for her usual tasks. But when she stepped inside the front door, she felt an overwhelming stillness. The usual hum of the house, the creaking floorboards, the rustling curtains, the occasional whisper of music was gone. There was nothing, just a silence so deep it felt suffocating. She walked through the rooms, checking each one, but everything seemed wrong. The air was thick with tension, the energy within the walls cold, as if the house had finally exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. She reached the music room and gasped on the piano. An album cover had been carefully placed. The cover was of Queen's greatest hits, the album Freddie had cherished, and there was a handwritten note, tucked beneath it. "Thank you for the love. It was time to go." The housekeeper stared at the note, trembling. Something in her gut told her that Freddie's presence had finally released, but at a terrible cost. She could feel that, somehow, the house had stopped holding its breath. The unexplainable phenomena, the haunting melodies, the shadows, they were gone. But the stillness felt far worse. Weeks later, the house was sold. Despite its storied history, no one truly wanted to live there anymore. Those who had been close to Freddie began to distance themselves, unsure of the house's true nature. And as the new owners moved in, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One night, while exploring the attic, they stumbled upon an old, dust-covered trunk. Inside were dozens of personal belongings, old letters, photographs, and mementos of Freddie's life. But at the very bottom of the trunk, wrapped carefully in velvet, was a small, antique music box. As the new owners turned the key and wound it up, a soft, haunting melody filled the attic. It was a tune no one had ever heard before, sweet, delicate, and almost sorrowful. But the moment the music began, a cold wind rushed through the room. The attic door slammed shut, and the temperature dropped dramatically. The music played louder, more frantic now, as if it was calling them. The couple screamed, tried to break down the door, but the wind howled in fury. The music box continued to play, louder still, until it suddenly stopped, dead silence. When they finally managed to open the door, the room was empty. The box was gone. In the years that followed, no one ever truly understood what had happened at Garden Lodge. The house remained, but it seemed as though something had changed. The strange events faded into rumors, passed on by those who had dared to experience its dark energy. But one thing remained, the music. One last story surfaced, one that chilled those who still believed in the supernatural. A small group of fans, unaware of the house's grim reputation, ventured to the gates of Garden Lodge years after Freddie's passing. They stood silently in front of the iron gates, their eyes tracing the outline of the house, when they heard it. The unmistakable sound of a piano. It wasn't loud, nor was it coming from the music room. It was faint, almost distant, but it was undeniably Freddie's voice. The notes were pure, smooth, but laced with an odd, unsettling vibration. The group hesitated, unsure of what to do, when the music stopped abruptly. Then, from behind the gates, a shadow appeared. A tall, slender figure with unmistakable grace. It was as if Freddie himself had been standing just inside, watching, waiting. But when they blinked, the figure was gone, leaving behind only a fading note that echoed through the night. A final farewell. For those who had experienced Garden Lodge, the haunting was never about fear. It was about a presence, an energy, something that defied the natural order of life and death. Freddie Mercury had left the world, but he had not left the house. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Any coincidences with real events or characters are accidental.